And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest today is Annie Steward, who during her near-death experience, her consciousness was in her house while her body was in the hospital. Annie, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being here.
Well, we are happy to have you today. And if you don't mind, let's start on the day that you had the NDE and go from there.
Okay. My sister Kate had just come home to me on hospice. She was passing from cancer, and I got her two cats from her house and her dog. So now I had a zoo at home with my two cats. For the first week, it was fine. And then the cats got in a fight, and somehow I got involved in it, and I got bitten or scratched by a cat. And I ended up in hospital after thinking I was being smart, and I took an antibiotic to stop it. And I went into anaphylaxis pretty quickly. Got into the hospital, and I I don't know whether it was, the nurse afterwards had said to me, "You came really, really close." But I'm lying in this bed and not feeling good, and I'm seeing all the machines going on, and then I was gone. And I found myself up against, I don't want to say up against the ceiling because there was no ceiling. It was just a gray, like wet beach sand feeling around. And I was looking down on Kate in her bed in my living room. And she was sleeping, and there was a friend sitting on the couch and watching her. And the question came from me, but in my mind was, what would happen to Katie if I died now? And the answer floated back, don't worry, she'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then then that faded. And then all the animals, all four cats and the dog, I just saw them. And the same question, what would happen if I die now? And the same answer came back. And then the faces of my three adult kids came up. And before the question was even fully asked, I knew the question was coming from me, but it wasn't me. It was some subconscious part of me wanting to know. But before that question was even fully asked, I knew that, I could almost feel myself going, no, not now, not yet. I'm not ready to leave them yet. So I didn't even get that answer. And then that was done. So I don't know how much longer it was. After that, the nurse woke me up and she said, okay, you're fine. You can go home. And it was strange because when she was talking, I could see her mouth moving, but I was hearing her not with my ears. And so she said, okay, you can go. And I went out the door, and there was a nurse standing outside. And I didn't know how it got into the hospital, so I didn't know which way out. So I kind of looked at him, and he looked at me weird, and then he pointed, showed me the exit sign. I went out. And as I'm walking down out the door to the hospital, I had to call my nephew to come and get me again. I could see the cars, and I could see there were people, but it was totally silent. And the thought came to mind was like, I don't know whether I'm alive or dead. And it was really the strangest feeling. I just didn't know. So I walked across the little road, and there was a concrete sidewalk next to a brick building. And I thought, all right, I've got to test whether I'm alive or dead before I call somebody to come get me, because I'm not sure how all that works. And I thought, if I put my hand on the wall and it goes through, well, then I'm dead. But how am I going to feel about that? So I'm standing on this little sidewalk, and I'm tentatively touching the wall. And my hand didn't go through, but I felt it all the way down. After a little while, I kind of came back together. And then I called my nephew, and that was fine. And now I wonder how many people watch this little old lady standing touching a wall all the way down. It's kind of a funny thought. But that was a very unusual feeling. It was almost like I had a foot in each world. And it took a little bit before the sounds came back, before I could hear the birds again in the cars. So that was a very short experience. Not frightening in any way. There were no, as I said, no colors, no lights, nothing. It was just that grayness. But that was that one.
Where do you think the answer was coming from? Like another being or from your own consciousness?
I didn't sense any other being, um, but I knew it was almost like a being is like a singular. It was coming from everything else. It was coming from somewhere that I knew was there and I was comfortable with, and I knew the answer would come from, but it wasn't a singular. It wasn't. It was an all-encompassing answer that just I don't quite know how to explain that. I've never been asked that. Um, just a just a voice. It was just an answer, and it was like it floated. It was just a gentle answer.
Maybe like from some unified field of intelligence?
Yes, that would it was something that even in that moment I understood that it was from something that was the everything.
By any chance, while you were there above your sister and her friend, did the pets see you?
Not that I know of. Not that I'm aware of. I didn't see them when I was up looking down at her. I didn't see any of the animals. What I did see was the friend of ours who was watching Katie. I saw where she was sitting, and I noticed that that was an unusual place, that she doesn't normally sit there when she comes to visit. That she was sitting in an unusual place, and I asked her about that afterwards. Said, "Why were you sitting in the couch in the lounge? Why were you sitting there where you don't normally sit there?" And she was a little bit flabbergasted and saying, "Well, how would you know that?" So, but no, I didn't see the animals at all. In that, when I was looking at Kate, it was only when that had faded, and then all the animals popped up. The next vision or the next view in my mind was all of them together. But and both, well, all the animals, and the next step when my children's faces came up, they were looking at me, but they don't have any recollection of that. There wasn't any of that.
At least you were able to verify that she
Yeah.
was sitting in a different place. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, there was I told her later on, after the next thing that had happened, I had spoken to her, because she was always very much into the spiritual world of things, and I had had a lot of experiences in my life that I basically just ignored because life went on. But then I spoke to her, and then I told her about, because I did, when she asked me how did I know that, I just brushed that off because my attention was all on Kate. So we just let that go, and I told her only later on. Yeah, it was an interesting verification.
After this experience, did you change in any way?
I don't know that I changed then. Um, Kate had had cancer for 10 years. We'd been doing it naturally, been fighting it with, as a team together. The last year had been really, really tough and really exhausting. And then being home on hospice with me as the sole caregiver, both day and night, literally, I was just too exhausted. I was just too tired to even take much of it in. And um, it was only after she had passed away and I'd had that experience with her there. It was about 2 days later that everything just came bum. And yes, it changed everything.
Hmm. You also had some sort of experience with her that it was like being a walk-in or something.
Yes, that was about a week or two after the near death experience. And it was all new to me, and I was really exhausted. And my friend walked in the door, and she took one look and she said, "You need a break, go and have a shower, go and take a break, lay down for a while, whatever." So I did. I headed off, and I standing in the shower, and all of a sudden I could feel Kate inside me, that I was Kate, but I was also me. And I heard in my head, she said, "Ha ha, sis, look what I can do," which is exactly the type of thing we do with, the way we would talk to each other. Well, I got out of the shower, bubbles and all. It was like, okay, I got such a shock because it's not a voice like you hear when you're thinking a thought. it's a separate voice, and it was her voice. And I had this feeling, and it was like, okay. So I jumped out the shower, and I got dressed, and I carried on with the day. And about, I don't know, 5, 6 days later, the same thing happened. I went to her shower, and I felt this again, where I was I was totally aware that I was two people. I was Kate and I was myself. So I reached up and I touched my hair, because her hair is coarser than mine. And I reached up, I'm like, wow, that is Kate. At the same time, I was standing in front of us, watching this. I could see myself lifting my hand up to my hair, and then it stopped. And I just went on with the shower, just that feeling of her being in there. Now, during these things, Kate was in the lounge, in my living room, in her bed, asleep. So she was still alive. It wasn't that she had passed and her spirit was coming, but there was something about. And then the third time that happened, after the second time, I had spoken to my friend, and she had said to me, if I want to, I can ask Kate not to do this, because at that point, I knew I was losing my sister. She's my closest friend. She's my buddy, my partner in crime. It was going to be a lifetime, and I was exhausted, and I wasn't sure how much I could deal with that as well. So when it happened for the third time, as it was, I could feel her coming into me. It was like, and I just quickly said to her, "No, I love you, but you can't do this now. I can't do it now. I don't have the strength to do that and everything else." And it never happened again.
Hmm.
But it was interesting how the first time she spoke, the second time I could feel her hair, but I could, and I was outside looking in, and I could looking. I was both. I was here and I was there, and I could acknowledge how I felt with her in me, and feeling the hair, as well as standing there, and I could see that it was both of us, and I could see what I was doing. It was, I'd never heard of that before, and I still don't quite know how to place it or how to name it.
My guess is that when you were in the shower, it was almost like a meditation for you. You were relaxed. Maybe the sound of the water kind of distracted you from your thoughts, and that made it easier for her to connect with you.
Yes, also because there were very few times that I was not directly with Katie, and that she was with somebody that I knew that she was safe and okay and could take care of her, whatever the situation arose. So I knew in those times were the times that I absolutely knew that I could let go of the caregiver part and just try and breathe and get myself together again. So yes, that's probably it. I'd let go of all the noise in my head.
That's an amazing experience. I think actually you're the first person that has told me that.
That was I've looked for it and I haven't found anything similar. I looked, looking online, looking for things, but and I say I still don't know how to explain that, or it's just one of those things that happened.
There are people out there that are channelers. I wonder if somehow you would have had the energy to do so, that you could have let Kate speak through your voice.
Yeah, and I wish she'd said something. Well, she did say something funny. Ha ha, sis, look what I can do. She's cheeky like that. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of what happened with all of this. When there were three things that happened. We've spoken about two. When when all of these were done and Katie was passed and the days went by, it was as if there was an opening up and a remembering of the things that have happened to me since I was about 18. It started at 18. And evidently I'm more open to a lot of things than I ever even paid more than 10 minutes attention to. So there's a tremendous amount of change and deeper understanding and a million more questions than I ever had before because of these things. And the two that I've spoken about feel like a lead up to the shared death experience. And then after the shared death experience, and well, after Katie died, there has been so much that has happened, so much communication from her, so much contact with her, that something is going on, and I don't know what it is at this point.
Well, tell us what happened with the shared death experience.
All right, the shared death, for the hospice had been in, and they had said that she was imminent. She was going to be going for the last 4 days or so. She knew it. We'd had the conversations about her passing, and she'd always said that she didn't know what was on the other side. If there was something, well, then good. And she hoped she got to go to the good side of whatever was there. But if there was nothing, she was okay with it. But I learned very young, Kate was only exactly a year older than me, that she was tough on the outside and jello inside. So she had a way that when she smiled or spoke, if her mouth went up, I knew that that was the inside tell, that she wasn't quite comfortable with what she was saying. So we had had the conversations of her passing, and the last 2 days, we could not understand why she was not passing, what she was holding on for. She had seen her kids, they'd all been here. She'd said goodbye, she'd accepted, she knew she was ready to go. She was just didn't know where she was going. And this friend of mine who was, she's an ICU nurse, and she had stayed with me much of the night before Katie died, the Monday night, Tuesday night. And she got up at, it was before dark. I mean, it was still dark. It was before light. And she got up and she said, I have to go. And I'm like, that's weird, because that's a very definite, not I want to go, I need to go. She said, I have to go. And she leaned over and she kissed Katie and she said, goodbye, I'll see you on the other side. And a tear came out of Kate. Now, Kate had been um, she'd been totally non-responsive for 2 days, 2 full days and 2 nights, about 2.5 days. And a little tear ran out of Kate's eye. So I said to this friend, I went to the door, let her out, and I locked the door behind her, and I came to sit on the couch because I was nervous, because I know she's dying. I know it can happen any minute. I didn't want to miss it, but I was alone with her, and it was it was scary. And so I sat on the couch and I thought, I'm just going to pull myself together and breathe a little bit, and then I'll go and sit with Katie. And immediately I sat down and was, no, you need to be there now. So I leaned forward to get up off the couch. And you know, when you're getting up off the couch, your vision is the floor. And right in front of me was a bold number, 842. It was like an old alarm clock. All those little pieces make up the numbers, but it was red and it was 842. And I thought, I don't know what's happening. And I pushed that away. I pulled up a chair, kind of like an office chair without a back, and I put the ratings down on Katie's bed. And I laid my head on the pillow next to her bed, or next to her head. And an African, I don't know where it came from because I hadn't thought about it in years, was an African lullaby that my dad would sing to her when she got stung by some sea critter once, and I remember that so clearly. And he would sing this, and I heard this lullaby coming out of my mouth, and it was like I could almost visualize it pouring into her ear. And I just started singing that, and then I don't know how long that was. It wasn't very long. And then I noticed that I could only now see her up to her shoulders and me up to my shoulders. The rest of the house had disappeared into that same wet beach sand gray, not dark, not threatening, just a comfortable gray. My living room had disappeared. I couldn't hear the cats. I couldn't hear the dog snoring. I couldn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, we were on a road. I was standing, and there was this road in front of me. Katie was standing next to me. And the road was slightly convex, and on each side into the distance it was like muted pastel colored flowers and plants. And being a photographer, I kind of looked at it and I thought, wow, that would make a nice photograph. And all the color disappeared. It was instant. There was the flowers and the plants were still there. They weren't see-through. They had color. I couldn't see the color anymore, but I knew they had color. So Kate's next to me, and in the last particularly 6, 7 months before she passed, she had a lot of pain. She couldn't stand. She couldn't walk properly. Well, she couldn't walk. She couldn't stand properly. And she was standing next to me, and I remember feeling her because I didn't look at her. I knew she was there, but I could feel her feelings, and I could feel her pain and her confusion. And I just said to her, "But Katie, you can stand and walk now with no pain." And out of my peripheral vision, I saw her hopping around, testing her legs, and I could feel her like, "Oh, wow, okay." And then I said, and she got settled. She was like, "Okay, now she can stand." So she kind of stood up a little bit better. And I don't know. I remember thinking at that time, as I started talking to her, that I don't know how I know what it is I have, or what I'm saying, but I know. And I said to her, "Katie, we're here on the road. We're going to walk down to the end of the road. There's a gate over there. All right. And we got to go to the gate." And she had this thing the last year of her life because of the pain and adjustments and emotional and physical. She would say, "Give me a minute." And I always knew to just stop and wait for her to breathe and get through that. And then she'd go on. So she says, "Give me a minute." Okay, take all the time you need. And we start walking down this road and we're communicating, but just gently, nothing particular for until we get to about halfway. But every couple of minutes, she would say, "Give me a minute." And I'd tell her, "Take all the time you need." And she'd just stop and I could feel her, I could feel that jello part of her, the tough girl, the, the tough, she was a single-handed, she was a single-handed solo sailor across Atlantic Ocean multiple times. She was a tough girl, but that was gone. What was inside was she didn't know what was coming next. She wasn't terrified, but she was nervous. She didn't know. So it took us a while to get to about the halfway point, and she stopped and said, "Annie, I would rather stay here with you." Now, her talking wasn't like I'm talking. It was in my head. I could hear her. And again, up until I still hadn't looked at her, she hadn't looked at me. We were walking together, but not looking at each other. And I had the actually quite incredible opportunity to tell her again how much she'd meant to me, how much of an impact on my life she'd had, how I'd miss her and how I'd never forget her and all that stuff. But it was also like a packet going across to her telepathically. And I could feel, and I said to her, "We can't stop. We can't go left or right. We can't go back as much as I wish we could. We have to go forward." And I said, "If you look behind the gates, you can start seeing all your people are waiting for you." And she kind of looked, but you couldn't see clearly at that point. And after a little bit, she said, "Okay, we can go forward." And we got to about, I would estimate 6 feet away from the gate. Now, this gate the pillars were square. There was nothing to the sides of them. There was no land or plants or anything, color or no color. There was nothing. And the gate had a rounded top with metal bars. I say metal bars that came down that you could see past. You could see through and could see past. So I would tell her, "Look, you can see people behind the gate. Look, because they're all waiting there for you." And she put her head sideways, and then I started naming them. I said, "Look, there's mom and there's dad and there's auntie so-and-so and cousin so-and-so and whatever." And she totally stiffened up. She totally went into lockdown. And I said, "No, you don't need to worry. They're not going to come and get you. They will only reach for you when you have reached for them." And she immediately relaxed. She was like, "Okay, I can do this." And I stood there while waiting for her to be okay again. And I told her that to open the gate, what she needed to do was lift her hand up like you do in a classroom. And at that moment, I also thought, I don't know how I know that. But before she lifts her hand, I told her that I have to take a step back. So wait for me to take a step back. I'll stay with her. I'm going to stay with her till the end. But I have to take a step back from her. before she lifted her hand and she said, okay, give me a minute. That was a regular thing all the way through. And we stood there for a while, and then she said to me, can I look at you one last time? And I said, yes, of course you can. So she turned around. She was now one step in front of me. She turned over her shoulder, and she came almost all the way around. And I could see her blue eyes. The color was in her. I could see color in her. I could see her blue eyes. I could see the complexion of her skin, the color of her hair. And she was healthy again. She had lost all that drawn from being sick for so long. And it was incredible, but she she didn't look at me very long. And I remember feeling, wow, I wish you could have looked at me for longer. But immediately her attention was drawn to the gate. And she lifted up her hand, and that gate slid from right to left, but it disappeared into the pillar. It didn't go past the gatepost like gates do. It disappeared into that, and all these people were there. They weren't like I'm seeing you or see people. It was more like a minimalist painting where somebody takes a paintbrush and it's one stroke and there's the dress and the dot and there's the head. Again, I knew they had color. I knew some of them had shirts and shorts, some of them had dresses, some of them had skirts, and others there were long pants. But they weren't all melded together. They were separate, but I couldn't see the details of them. I could see that they were all looking at Kate. There was not one person that was looking my way. And it was such a feeling of amazement that this is all about Kate. This has nothing to do with me. It's all about them all being there for Kate, and they all stood with their hands to their side. So I started saying to Katie, look, there's Mom, there's Dad, and there's my nephew who had died from suicide 2 years earlier. He also had autism, and this boy was standing there, and he was incredible. He was had this big smile on his face. Everything was clear, and he was excited. And a friend of Kate's, whose husband had recently died, he was there, and it was all these people that I knew. And then I knew some of them were friends of Kate's that had passed. And then there were people that I knew, but I couldn't place them. Like when you go to a grocery store, you in a big gathering and you see somebody, you say, I know that person, I just can't say where from. There were a lot of those people too. And we stood there, and I was just taking this all in, and I could feel Kate was standing upright, and I could feel her emotion was, wow, okay, this is going to be okay. And then she asked me, can I wave at you one last time? And I said, yes, of course you can. And she had this crooked kind of wave she did. Now she was now still in front of me. And so she waved, she never turned around again. The color had gone again, even in her. And as she waved, she put that hand down, her left hand down, and she put her right hand out. And the only word that comes to mind is she jauntily walked off. She always walked fast. She always had this bounce in her step. And she walked and she put her hands out, and she put her hands out to them. And then there was this most incredible greeting that happened. It was like it was like a surprise party that had been planned for her, but with people that she never thought she would see again. And it was just so much. I could feel the joy and the love, but it wasn't including me. It was all for her. At the same time, I didn't feel excluded. It wasn't something I was wishing I was part of, or thinking, well, gee, my mom didn't even look at me, or neither did my dad. Or, it wasn't that draw. It was just such an incredible feeling of, wow, look at them. They're all there for her. And they were all busy greeting each other and hugging. And then I noticed a thin line between the gateposts. And I thought, well, why is there hair on the ground? And then it split. It was this side of the gate and that side of the gate. And that grew longer. And the part that they were all on just drifted away. The gateposts and all just drifted away into a mistiness, into a fog. And at that moment, as it drifted away, again, the voice comes in, and I heard this voice just said, "That was a job well done." And I wasn't surprised. I didn't feel during the whole time that there was another presence. I didn't feel alone or worried or scared. And I wasn't surprised at hearing the voice. I mean, me as I am now, wouldn't have thought there would have been, but there was this voice that just said, "That was a job well done." It was round, it was neither female or male, it was a soft, gentle, there wasn't there wasn't praise in the words, there wasn't kudos, there wasn't like wow or anything like that. It was just a statement. It was as if I had done a job. And then I remember either looking, I think it felt like I moved slightly to the left because now the gate there was nothing there anymore. The road had kind of just blended out. And I'd moved to the left and I saw this mist coming towards me, like a fog of mist. And it enveloped me. And I remember thinking, I know what a silkworm feels like inside its cocoon. And I was held upright in this position, inside this cocoon of mist, fog, cotton wool. And I didn't feel, when people talk about they felt this overwhelming rush of love or they saw light. That's not what happened, but I felt as if parts of me were being put back into place. As if I was being not rebuilt as something different, but rebuilt as in just being put back together. And then there was a little pop feeling. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. It was pop. And I was back in my living room. I was still leaning over Kate's bed. My head was still next to her head on the pillow, but I could see that everything was back. And I lifted my eyes and I looked at the clock, and the clock ticked over to 8:42 a.m. And I slightly lifted my head to look at Katie, and her last breath went on my face. Now, that 8:42 was the number I saw when I got off the couch, but it was 8:42 a.m. And I looked up and I thought, wow, it's light already. Now, my friend, and I confirmed this with her, she had left roundabout, was either just after, it was at 7, within 5 minutes either side of 7 o'clock in the morning. My back was not breaking. I had been leaning over this hospice bed for an hour and 42 minutes approximately. And then Katie left at 8:42. So it was just such it was an emotional thing in that I had walked with her to the other side, but now that's that reality. And now I'm looking at my sister who's gone. So there were a couple of days where I literally just did not process it. I didn't go there. I just let it lay for a couple of days.
Well, that was an amazing experience. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
When you saw her looking healthy and vibrant again, did she look younger or the same age?
No, she was younger. She was not younger as in when she was in her teens or 30. She was just younger within the last, I would say, what she looked like 5 years ago, where she was happy, where she was free. We had moved down to the beach. She was busy with life. She was, feeling good. So it wasn't like a much younger Katie. It was just a time period that she was at the best of her life. She still had cancer at that time, but she was really at the healthiest that she had been. And just to say that as well, when I saw my mom, who had passed from Alzheimer's, and my dad, Lewy body disease, which is both very ravaging on the body, they also both looked younger, but also not many years younger. They just looked to where they were at their best, as well as with my nephew who had passed. He looked as he looked when he was feeling good in life.
Could you say that they looked like they were in their prime?
My feeling with that was that they all looked like they felt the best. Um, they all looked looked like they were really happy with whether it was their, yes, actually, yes. If I think of both my mom and my dad and also Katie, it was as if they went back to the time that they physically and emotionally felt the best.
I didn't ask you earlier, but was she ever conscious around the time that she would visit you in the shower and you were able to ask her about that?
I didn't ask her that. Yes, she was conscious after that, for probably three weeks after that. And yes, we had conversations, but not particularly that, because what I found with Kate was that in the last, particularly the last 6 months of her life, her brain was concentrated on what she was going through. And when I say this, I don't mean it in any negative way. It's almost like she became all about her. She was concerned that I was okay. She was concerned that her kids were okay. But when there was conversation, it was almost like she didn't have the capacity to address anybody else's issues. So I didn't approach her with those issues because I didn't want her to go to a place she was uncomfortable with. So we'd had a talk, and interesting, about, oh gosh, maybe a week before she passed away. We were having a talk, and she looked at me and she was very tearful. And she said to me, and her mouth was quivering, and she said, Annie, I get this extremely strong feeling that there's going to be two of us going, not two of us dying. She said, I have this extremely strong feeling that there's going to be two of us going. And I knew that what she meant was she was worried that I was also going to die. That's what I took that as being. And I said to her, no, 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 this is your journey. I'm going to be with you, but I probably want to feel like, or I'm going to feel like I'm going to die because I'm going to miss you so much, but I don't feel like I'm going to die. And she just looked at me and I said, well, have you had these feelings before? And she said, yes, occasionally, but they stopped. But this is just something I wanted to tell you. And in retrospect, two of us did go. But I never really spoke to her about, well, no, I never spoke to her about the shower issue, not to her personally.
After she had crossed over and things kind of settled down for you, did
Mm.
you notice that you had any new abilities that could be considered psychic?
Yes and no. And I'm leaning towards the no side because I haven't explored what that exactly means. Because in in trying to process this, I've realized that there have been so many things in my life. I had a dream about a friend's husband who died. They were in a different country. I didn't know he had issues. And in the dream, he told me to tell his wife that he was okay. And I called her saying, what's going on? I'm dreaming about your husband, saying to tell you he's okay. And she said, no, he passed 3 months ago. So there's those things that had happened. But after Katie died, a lot of things started happening. Um, I had a visual visitation from her. My friend, the one who kind of was with me when, well, not with me, but during the time she sent me off for a shower and who would sit with Katie, she said to me, you are more spot on with, she had some issues with jobs or whatever, and I don't hear things, but things come to me. They arrive in my brain without being words. It's like somebody says, I've got this issue going on, and the words that come out of me aren't from me. They're not my thoughts. They, I know, and I've said to Aranel that I don't know where this is coming from, but this is what I have to tell you. So I don't know whether that's more since Katie died, or just because I'm paying attention to it, or whether that was also something that happened before she passed.
Can you share with us the experience of her visiting you from the other side?
Yes, there's that visitation it was 3 o'clock in the morning is my magic hour, where if I have a problem during the day, I literally put it aside, and 3 o'clock in the morning, like clockwork, I'll wake up and I find a resolution to that. So she came into the 3 o'clock, I was fast asleep, and I woke up turning around because I knew she was standing on the other side of my bed. And I turned around and she was standing, and I remember thinking, you can't be standing on the ground because you higher up than it would be. In that one, I could see that she had khaki shorts on. She always used to wear khaki shorts, but she had a top on that I didn't recognize, pattern top, and she had a ball cap on her head. And she simply looked down, and I couldn't see all her features, but I knew she was smiling. And she said, "Hi, Annie." And then she was gone. And what was amazing was that I just went straight back to sleep, because now if that happened, I'd be awake with saucer eyes for hours wondering, okay, can I get her back, or can I talk some more, or why so quick? That's all she said was, "Hi, Annie." And then she was gone.
But you physically saw her, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I could see her in and I hadn't thought about this when you asked that question. I know I've seen her, but I could see her in 3D. She wasn't flat. She wasn't see-through. She had she had depth to her body. It was as if she was alive, standing there.
Has these experiences changed you in any way that now you see other people from the other side?
That I see other people on the other side?
Yeah, like maybe now you see other dead people, to put it like that.
No, I haven't had that at all. What I find is that I'm more in tune to their emotions. It's like walking the dog. If somebody's walking in front of me, I can feel their emotion. It's like, um, at one stage of my life, I could see auras, and I hadn't gone any further with that. I hadn't seen it consciously for many years, but now the feelings of people, or the emotions they're feeling, the inner turmoil or inner peace, is almost like it trails off them, and it's not, I don't take it in. It's not that I'm taking it in. It's just that it's an acknowledgement that I can feel what people are feeling. Um, since she's passed, again, I'm back to seeing auras, not all the time, because I find I need to sometimes just stop thinking and stop concentrating. I need to be in this world as well. Um, and what's been happening though, more than that, has been Kate's voice in my head. It's the one day I was really upset with her, and I was really angry that she had left, and I was going through that period, and I was stomping up the corridor, and Kate never believed in reincarnation. That was one thing she just said, no, that's just too woo-woo. She's not going to go there. And I was yelling at her, and I was stomping my feet, and I was having a little tantrum, and I said, this is not right. It's not fair. How could you do this to me? This is not right. And her voice was so clear that I spun around to see if she was right behind me. She said, "No, remember last time you went first. Now it's your turn to stay longer." And so there's the changes of that. And I find that it's almost like I'm attracted to people who have stories. It's like I'm very careful who I tell this, well, until now, I've been very careful who I tell the story to, because I live in a small community. And up until that time, I'd been conscious of, you kind of got to keep a certain sense of sanity. But now I find that I almost get drawn to telling people the shared death experience, particularly people that I normally wouldn't tell that to. And almost all of them have come back and said that has really made a difference to how we're dealing with it, getting older, how they're dealing with their thoughts and their coping with their own passing. So I'm finding that I'm being drawn to people I wouldn't normally talk to about this.
At this point in your life, do you fear death at all?
No, no. I'd really not given it much thought before. Yeah, with my mom passing, and my dad, and my nephew, and a whole lot of close people. But because life was busy, the last 10 years had been, before that um, I was dealing with my son with leukemia. So for 15 years, going back, which takes me to, like, I don't know, 45, I really hadn't thought about death as relating to me. I was busy trying to get others not to die. So it's a different conversation in my head, but I'd never given it enough thought. But right now, I don't particularly want to die right now. I've got a lot I want to do, but I know it's going to be beautiful.
Well, if you encountered somebody that was grieving over the loss of a loved one, what type of advice would you give?
Just to be quiet. That's not the time I tell them about my experiences. It's just sit and be with that person. Talk to them, whether it's quietly or out loud. Just talk to them because they are there. Just be quiet with your grief. Take it. Don't. I pushed my grief away. I pushed going on the walk with Katie was one of the most incredible gifts I think I could ever be given. But it didn't, and it did help my grief a lot because I saw where she went. I saw I saw that she's okay. There's no question in my mind of, is she okay? Where is she? That issue was cleared up for me. But it didn't stop the grief. And I felt that because I'd had that experience, that I shouldn't feel that grief because it's then selfish, because I know where Kate is. But I've since come to learn that we're allowed to be selfish with our grief. We're allowed to fall down and not cope for a while. And it's kinder to ourselves to feel that rather than put it off because it's going to happen. So be gentle on yourself and just sit with that grief and hold it and let it be. And I find the times that I'm really having a hard time, the times that I'm really feeling empty and that I really miss Katie, those are the times that the connections happen. But again, that's not something I would tell somebody deep in grief, because that's putting my experience, trying to put it over theirs, and they need to have their own grief experience and maybe can hear these things later on.
Well, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
What's the best way to contact you?
Oh, wow. I have a Gmail account. I don't have a book to sell. I don't have a website. I don't have anything. So they can contact me on Annie's SDE, ANNIES, and then SDE@gmail.com.
All right. Well,
And I will answer every email. This is something I've learned that I need to, because when you're given something like this, it's what do you do with it? And I've spent almost a year wondering, what do I do with it? This is such a huge thing, but it's not only for me. It cannot possibly be only for me. And to try and find a way to share it. So if there's anybody out there that wants more detail maybe, or just to ask a question or to share theirs, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to answer them, yes.
that's great. Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Yes. Live this life with everything you've got, because there's more. And we're here for this as much as we want to sometimes not be here. Even the bad experiences are part of everything. And then when it's done, it's beautiful. Just you're going to look, from what I get, is dying is not a hard thing to do. Dying is not a hard thing it's not harsh, it's not cruel. It's a door open to something beautiful. So don't look for that. Live this, because that will come, and it is there. And whoever you've lost is close to you. I see it every day with Kate. Every day.
Annie, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.